Where is she? The graduates whispered as their valedictorian stood alone on the empty stage. The principal fumbled with his notes, ready to announce the missing keynote speaker. But then the auditorium doors crashed open, and 30 firefighters in dress uniforms marched down the aisle. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Captain Victoria Ashford stood in front of her bathroom mirror at 4:30 a.m., carefully adjusting the silver oak leaves on her dress uniform collar. At 47, she commanded the respect of every firefighter in Millbrook County, but today wasn't about commanding anyone. Today was about keeping the most important promise she'd ever made to another human being. Victoria had raised her niece Samantha from the age of 6, after her sister died in that terrible house fire 12 years ago. The same fire that had shaped Victoria's entire career path, driving her from a small-town paramedic to one of the most decorated fire chiefs in the state. Samantha was graduating valedictorian from Riverside Academy today, and Victoria had promised to deliver the keynote speech at the ceremony, not just any speech. The speech, the one they'd been planning together for 3 months, writing and rewriting every word until it perfectly captured everything Victoria wanted to tell not just Samantha, but every young person preparing to face the world's challenges. Samantha had specifically requested that her Aunt Vic be the one to speak, turning down offers from senators, business leaders, and even a best-selling author who'd offered to fly in from New York. "I want the person who taught me what real strength looks like," Samantha had told the school board with characteristic determination. "The woman who showed me that protecting others isn't just a job, it's a calling. The person who held me together when everything fell apart." Victoria's dress uniform hung perfectly pressed in protective plastic, every ribbon and commendation polished until it gleamed. Her speech notes were printed on special paper, highlighted and cross-referenced, tucked safely in her leather portfolio. She'd practiced the delivery 47 times over the past week, timing each section to perfection. The opening story about her sister, the middle section about finding purpose through service, the closing challenge for the graduates to find their own ways to make the world safer for others. This wasn't just any graduation speech. This was Victoria's chance to publicly honor the memory of her sister, to celebrate Samantha's incredible achievements, and to pass on the values that had guided her through 23 years of emergency response work. Samantha was heading to Stanford in the fall to study emergency management and disaster relief, following directly in her aunt's footsteps, but planning to take those lessons to an international level. Victoria had helped Samantha fill out every scholarship application, had driven her to every interview, had stayed up until 2 a.m. helping her write essays about overcoming tragedy and finding strength through service. When the full-ride scholarship came through, they'd cried together in Victoria's kitchen, holding the acceptance letter like it was made of gold. "You did this, sweetheart," Victoria had whispered, smoothing Samantha's hair the way she had when Samantha was little and scared. "You turned the worst thing that ever happened to us into fuel for helping other people." The graduation ceremony was scheduled for 10 a.m. at the Riverside Academy auditorium. Victoria would speak for exactly 12 minutes. She'd timed it perfectly right. After the principal's opening remarks and right before they called the graduates to receive their diplomas, Samantha would be sitting in the front row with the other honor students, probably fighting back proud tears the way she always did when Victoria spoke at public events. Victoria had invited her entire crew from Station 19 to attend. Captain Rodriguez from Station 7 was bringing his family. Even Chief Morrison from the county level had cleared his schedule to hear Victoria speak about the next generation of public servants. This wasn't just Samantha's moment, it was a celebration of everything their unconventional family had built together through love, determination, and shared commitment to serving others. The speech itself was deeply personal. Victoria planned to tell the story of the night she became Samantha's guardian, when she'd knelt down in the hospital waiting room and promised a terrified 6-year-old that they would face everything together from that moment forward. She wanted to talk about the challenges of raising a grieving child while building a demanding career, about the nights when they'd both cried themselves to sleep, about the gradual healing that came from channeling their pain into purpose. But more than that, Victoria wanted to challenge the graduating class to find their own ways to serve, to protect, to build something meaningful from whatever difficulties they'd faced. She'd written a section specifically about how the strongest people aren't those who avoid hardship, but those who transform their hardships into tools for helping others navigate similar struggles. Victoria checked her watch, 4:47 a.m., 5 hours, and 13 minutes until she'd walk onto that stage and deliver the most important speech of her life. Everything was ready. Her uniform, her notes, her words, her heart. She'd kept every promise she'd ever made to Samantha, and today would be no different. She kissed the framed photo on her nightstand, the one showing her and Samantha at last year's Fire Department Awards dinner, both of them laughing at something ridiculous Captain Martinez had said during his toast. In 5 hours, she'd be looking out at her niece's proud face as she delivered words that would honor both their journey and their future. Victoria Ashford had never broken a promise to Samantha. Today wouldn't be the first time. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Victoria was buttoning her dress uniform jacket when her emergency radio exploded with static at 5:43 a.m. The harsh crackle cut through the quiet morning like a knife, immediately followed by the voice of emergency dispatch. Coordinator Hayes, a voice Victoria had never heard sound this urgent in 15 years of emergency response. All available fire rescue personnel, code red emergency. Multiple structure collapse at Pinecrest Elementary School. Preliminary reports indicate catastrophic failure of the gymnasium roof during overnight maintenance. 7 construction workers trapped in the debris field. This is not a drill. We have confirmed life signs from at least 4 victims. Victoria's hand froze on her collar. Pinecrest Elementary was 30 miles outside her usual jurisdiction, but she knew exactly why her radio was broadcasting this. Call. The county's specialized heavy rescue coordinator was on medical leave. Captain Rodriguez from Station 7 was attending his son's wedding in Denver. That left exactly one person in the Tri-County area with the Advanced Technical Rescue certification needed for complex structural collapse operations. The radio crackled again with Dispatch Hayes' voice, now speaking directly to her call sign. Station 19 Command, we need you on scene immediately. County Emergency Management is requesting your specialized equipment and your personal oversight of this operation. The window for successful extraction is closing rapidly. Victoria stared at herself in the mirror, her dress uniform half-buttoned, her speech notes spread across her dresser next to Samantha's graduation program. The ceremony was exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes away. Even if she drove at maximum speed, Pinecrest Elementary was a 45-minute drive through winding mountain roads. A structural collapse rescue, especially one involving 7 victims, would take a minimum of 6 hours. More likely 8 or 10 hours if the debris pattern was complex. The mathematics were brutal and undeniable. She could not do both. Her personal phone buzzed with an incoming text from Samantha. Aunt Vic, I can't sleep. Too excited for your speech today. Thank you for everything you've done for me. I love you so much. Victoria's hands began shaking as she held the phone, reading those words while her emergency radio continued broadcasting updates from the scene. 7 construction workers were trapped under tons of concrete and twisted steel. 7 people with families, children, futures that depended on her specialized skills and experience. 7 human beings who would die if she wasn't there to coordinate their extraction, But Samantha was counting on her. The graduating class was counting on her. The school board had printed programs with her name featured prominently as the keynote speaker. She had practiced this speech 47 times. This was supposed to be their moment, the culmination of 12 years of shared struggle and growth. Her radio demanded an immediate response. Station 19 command, please confirm your availability and estimated time of arrival. We have victims showing signs of respiratory distress. Time is critical. Victoria picked up her radio with trembling fingers. Protocol demanded that she respond within 90 seconds of any emergency call. Lives literally hung in the balance of her next words. She thought about the construction workers trapped in darkness, probably terrified, possibly injured, definitely running out of time, she thought. About their families who would receive phone calls this morning that would either bring relief or devastating news. Then she thought about Samantha, who had already lost her parents and was now about to lose the one person who had never, ever failed to show up for her. Victoria closed her eyes and made the choice that would define everything that followed. Dispatch, this is Station 19 command. I'm en route to Pinecrest Elementary. Estimated arrival in 45 minutes. Requesting immediate deployment of heavy rescue equipment and coordination with county emergency management. I'll be leading the extraction operation. The words came out steady and professional, but the moment she released the radio button, Victoria sank onto her bed and buried her face in her hands. She had just broken the most sacred promise she'd ever made. In 4 hours, Samantha would be sitting in the front row of that auditorium, scanning the stage for a keynote speaker who would never appear. Victoria quickly changed from her dress uniform into her heavy rescue gear, reinforced pants, steel-toed boots, helmet with headlamp, safety harness already adjusted to her measurements. She grabbed her emergency response bag and her specialized tools, the equipment that could mean the difference between life and death for 7 trapped construction workers. As she headed toward her truck, Victoria's phone buzzed again. Another text from Samantha. I've been thinking about what you always tell me, that we find our strength by helping people who desperately need us. I'm so proud that you're my aunt and my hero. Victoria stared at that message for 30 seconds, then typed back with shaking fingers. Something urgent came up, sweetheart. I love you more than words can express. You are going to be absolutely incredible today. She couldn't bring herself to explain what something urgent meant. She couldn't find the words to tell Samantha that she was choosing strangers over the most important day of her niece's life. As Victoria drove through the pre-dawn darkness toward Pinecrest Elementary, her emergency radio continued providing updates. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. What she didn't know was that in 3 hours and 42 minutes, Principal Williams would be standing at a podium, apologizing to 847 graduating students and their families for a missing keynote speaker, and Samantha would be sitting in the front row, still checking her phone, still hoping. Victoria arrived at Pinecrest Elementary at 6:31 a.m. to find a scene of controlled chaos that would haunt her for years to come. The gymnasium's roof had collapsed inward like a house of cards, creating a twisted maze of concrete slabs, steel beams, and construction equipment. 7 men were buried somewhere beneath tons of debris, and the sound of their voices calling for help had grown noticeably weaker in the past hour. She immediately took command of the scene, coordinating with county emergency management and the 3 fire departments that had responded from neighboring districts. The structural engineer on site painted a grim picture. The remaining sections of the roof were unstable, threatening secondary collapse at any moment. Every rescue attempt would have to be executed with surgical precision and extraordinary care. We've got voice contact with 4 victims, reported Lieutenant Parker from Station 23. 2 are conscious and responsive. 2 are showing signs of significant trauma. The other 3 haven't responded to our calls in the past 20 minutes. Victoria studied the debris pattern through her tactical binoculars, her mind automatically calculating load distribution, potential void spaces, and the safest approach. Routes. This was exactly the kind of complex rescue operation that required her specialized training, the kind of situation where one wrong decision could turn a rescue into a recovery mission. At 7:15 a.m., her personal phone rang. It was Principal Williams from Riverside Academy. "Captain Ashford, I wanted to touch base about your speech this morning. We've had some last-minute VIP attendees confirm, including the county superintendent and a reporter from Channel 8 News. They're specifically coming to hear you speak about emergency preparedness in schools. This is going to be wonderful publicity for both the academy and the fire department." Victoria stared at the collapsed gymnasium while Principal Williams continued talking about media coverage and the exceptional turnout expected for the ceremony. She could hear one of the trapped construction workers calling weakly for his wife, his voice barely audible through the concrete and steel. "Principal Williams," Victoria interrupted quietly, "I need to tell you something important." "Of course." "Captain, is everything all right? You sound distressed." Victoria watched her rescue team carefully positioning hydraulic jacks to stabilize a precariously balanced concrete slab. "I'm currently leading a rescue operation for 7 trapped construction workers. I won't be able to deliver the keynote speech at graduation today." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for 15 seconds. Then Principal Williams' voice returned, tight with barely controlled frustration. "Captain Ashford, surely you understand the magnitude of this commitment. We have 847 graduating students and their families expecting to hear from you. The programs have already been printed. The media has been notified. This is Samantha's special day." "I understand the situation completely," Victoria replied, watching her team begin the delicate process of creating an access tunnel through the debris. "But 7 people will die if I'm not here to coordinate this extraction. Couldn't someone else handle the rescue operation? You're not the only qualified fire captain in the county." Victoria closed her eyes. "Actually, sir, I am the only person within 60 miles with advanced technical rescue certification for this type of structural collapse. Without that certification, any rescue attempt would likely cause a secondary collapse and kill everyone involved." Principal Williams' tone shifted to something that bordered on accusatory. "Captain Ashford, I have to say this is extremely disappointing and unprofessional. Samantha has been looking forward to this moment for months. You're essentially abandoning your niece on one of the most important days of her life." The words hit Victoria like physical blows. She looked down at her hands, still covered in concrete dust from her initial assessment of the debris field. "I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm trying to save 7 lives, but at what cost? Do you understand what this will do to Samantha? She specifically requested you as the keynote speaker because she wanted to honor everything you've taught her. Now she'll be sitting in that auditorium, humiliated, while we scramble to find a replacement speaker." At 8:47 a.m., Victoria's phone buzzed with a text from Samantha. "At Vic, I'm getting ready for graduation. I can't wait to hear your speech. Mom would be so proud of both of us today. See you in a few hours." Victoria stared at that message while her rescue team reported they'd established communication with a 6th victim who had been unconscious for the past 2 hours. The man was barely breathing and showing signs of internal bleeding. Every minute they delayed extraction decreased his chances of survival. She tried calling Samantha directly, but it went straight to voicemail. She tried texting back, but couldn't find words that would adequately explain why she was choosing strangers over the most important day in her niece's academic career. How could she tell Samantha that she was breaking the promise that mattered most? At 9:23 a.m., exactly 37 minutes before the graduation ceremony was scheduled to begin, Victoria received another call from Principal Williams. "Captain Ashford, I've been trying to reach you. We need to know immediately if you're going to make it to the ceremony. The media is here, the families are seated, and we need to either introduce you or find someone else to fill the speaking slot. Victoria could hear one of the trapped workers call in weakly for help in the background of her own environment. Her team had successfully stabilized the debris field and was making steady progress toward the first extraction point, but they were still hours away from getting everyone out safely. "I won't be there," she said simply. "I'm sorry. Please give Samantha my love and tell her I'm proud of her." "This is absolutely unacceptable," Principal Williams responded sharply. "Do you have any idea what you're doing to that young woman? She's been bragging about you for weeks, telling everyone how her aunt, the fire captain, was going to deliver the keynote address. Now she's going to be sitting there while we announce that you simply didn't show up." Victoria ended the call without responding and turned her attention back to the rescue operation. At 9:51 a.m., her team successfully extracted the first victim, a 34-year-old construction foreman with a punctured lung and severe lacerations. He was conscious and talking as they loaded him into the ambulance, 6 more to go. At exactly 10 a.m., while Victoria was coordinating the extraction of the second victim, the graduation ceremony at Riverside Academy was beginning 30 miles away. Principal Williams was stepping up to the podium to welcome 847 graduating students and their families. Samantha was sitting in the front row, scanning the stage expectantly, still hoping her aunt would appear at the last minute like she always did. Her phone showed no new messages. Victoria Ashford, the woman who had never missed a single important moment in 12 years, was nowhere to be found. And for the first time in her adult life, Samantha began to understand what abandonment actually felt like. Principal Williams stepped up to the podium at Riverside Academy at exactly 10:07 a.m., his face flushed with barely concealed irritation as he surveyed the packed auditorium. 847 graduating students sat in perfectly arranged rows, their families filling every available seat in the ornate ceremony hall. Local media representatives had positioned their cameras strategically, and County Superintendent Morrison sat prominently in the front section, having specifically requested to attend Captain Ashford's keynote address. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Riverside Academy's Class of 2025 graduation ceremony," Principal Williams began, his voice carrying a forced enthusiasm that couldn't quite mask his underlying frustration. "We have a slight adjustment to this morning's program that I need to address immediately." Samantha looked up sharply from the front row, her graduation cap slightly askew from constantly turning to scan the auditorium entrance. She'd been checking her phone obsessively for the past 20 minutes, but Victoria's last message had simply said, "Something urgent came up." No explanation, no details, no reassurance. "Our scheduled keynote speaker, Captain Victoria Ashford of the Millbrook County Fire Department, has encountered an unexpected emergency and will not be joining us today," Principal Williams announced, his tone carrying unmistakable disapproval. "We are currently working to arrange alternative remarks for this portion of the ceremony." The murmur that rippled through the auditorium was immediate and uncomfortable. Parents turned to each other with raised eyebrows and whispered questions. Several family members of other students glanced toward Samantha, with expressions that ranged from sympathetic to smugly satisfied. The local news reporter quickly made a note on her tablet, clearly disappointed that her planned feature story about the fire captain's inspirational address had just evaporated. "That's Samantha Ashford in the front row," someone whispered loudly, enough for multiple rows to hear. "The one whose aunt was supposed to speak. She's been talking about this speech for weeks." Mrs. Henderson, seated 3 rows behind Samantha, leaned toward her husband with barely lowered voice. "I always thought it was inappropriate to have a family member deliver the keynote address anyway. It's obviously nepotism when you really think about it." "Where exactly is she?" asked Mr. Davidson, whose daughter Emma was sitting 2 seats away from Samantha. What kind of emergency is more important than your own niece's graduation? Especially when you've made such a public commitment. County Superintendent Morrison shifted uncomfortably in his VIP seat, clearly frustrated that he'd rearranged his entire morning schedule to hear a speech that wasn't going to happen. He'd specifically requested to attend after hearing about Captain Ashford's innovative approaches to emergency preparedness education in schools. Now he was stuck at a ceremony that had lost its primary draw. The whispers grew louder and more pointed as the minutes ticked by without any appearance from Victoria. "It's absolutely unprofessional," declared Mrs. Patterson, whose son Jake was graduating with honors alongside Samantha. "You don't commit to be the keynote speaker at a graduation ceremony and then simply not show up. These young people deserve better than that kind of treatment. I heard she's some kind of workaholic who never prioritizes family anyway," added Mrs. Chun, though she'd never actually met Victoria personally. "My daughter Emma mentioned that Samantha always talks about how her aunt is constantly getting called away for emergencies. Some people just shouldn't take on parental responsibilities if they can't handle the commitment." Samantha could hear every word. The comments cut deeper with each passing minute, especially because she couldn't defend Victoria without knowing what emergency had pulled her away. She sat with perfect posture in her graduation gown, hands folded in her lap, fighting back tears of humiliation and confusion. "Maybe the emergency is just an excuse," suggested Mr. Rodriguez from the back section, his voice carrying clearly through the auditorium's excellent acoustics. "Some people panic when they have to speak in public. Could be she just got cold feet about addressing this large of an audience." Emma Davidson turned around to face Samantha directly. "Sam, do you know what happened to your aunt? This is so embarrassing. Everyone's staring at us." Samantha shook her head silently, not trusting her voice to remain steady. She'd practiced her own response for when Victoria's speech concluded. She was supposed to stand and acknowledge her aunt's words, maybe even give a small wave to show their connection. Instead, she was sitting alone while hundreds of people speculated about Victoria's absence and her own family situation. The school board members huddled together near the stage, clearly scrambling to find someone who could deliver impromptu remarks substantial enough to fill the keynote speaking slot. Assistant Principal Martinez suggested reading inspirational quotes from famous graduates of other schools. The guidance counselor offered to speak about college preparation, though she'd had no time to prepare anything meaningful. "This is what happens when you rely on family connections instead of proven professional speakers," Mrs. Henderson continued. Her commentary, apparently unaware or uncaring that Samantha could hear every word. "The girl probably pressured them to let her aunt speak just because she's in some kind of uniform. Real keynote speakers understand the importance of honoring their commitments." Channel 8 news reporter Jessica Walsh was growing visibly impatient, checking her watch repeatedly and clearly calculating whether this story was worth her continued time investment. She'd been planning to feature Captain Ashford's speech as part of a larger segment about first responders and education, but now she had nothing but an awkward ceremony with a missing speaker. "We should have insisted on a backup plan," muttered School Board President Thompson to his colleague. "This kind of situation reflects poorly on our entire institution. Parents invest significant time and money in their children's education here, and we've essentially wasted their morning with this fiasco." At 10:23 a.m., Principal Williams returned to the podium looking harried and apologetic. "We're continuing to work on alternative arrangements for this portion of the ceremony. In the meantime, we'll proceed with recognizing our honor graduates and scholarship recipients." But the damage was done. The ceremony that should have been celebrating academic achievement and future possibilities had transformed into an uncomfortable public examination of Victoria Ashford's priorities and Samantha's family situation. Every announcement felt hollow, every transition felt awkward, and the absence of the keynote address left a gaping hole in the program's emotional arc. Samantha sat through it all with forced composure, her graduation cap casting a shadow over her face as she blinked back tears of disappointment and embarrassment. She thought about all the times Victoria had promised that family comes first, that being there for each other was what mattered most. She thought about the speech they'd planned together, the words that were supposed to honor her mother's memory and celebrate their journey together. Most of all, she thought about the growing certainty that Victoria Ashford had finally chosen her job over her family, leaving Samantha to face the most important day of her academic life completely alone. Samantha sat perfectly still in the front row as the whispers continued to swirl around her like a suffocating fog. Her hands were folded precisely in her lap, her back straight with the military bearing Victoria had taught her since childhood. "When the world gets difficult, sweetheart, you stand tall and face it head on," Victoria had always said. "That's how we honor the people who can't be here to stand with us." But right now, it felt like Victoria was choosing not to be here, and that made all the difference. The ceremony continued its awkward progression around the gaping hole where the keynote address should have been. Principal Williams announced the honor graduates with forced enthusiasm, each name feeling like a placeholder for the speech that everyone had been expecting. Samantha's own recognition as valedictorian received polite applause, but she could feel the sympathetic stares and whispered conversations that followed her back to her seat. "Poor thing," she heard Mrs. Patterson murmur to her husband. "You can see how humiliated she is." This is exactly the kind of disappointment that shapes a young person's ability to trust others. Samantha closed her eyes and reached deep into the reservoir of strength that Victoria had spent 12 years helping her build. She thought about the night her parents died, when 6-year-old Samantha had sat in a hospital waiting room, terrified and alone until Victoria had knelt down beside her chair and made a promise that changed everything. "I know you're scared, sweetheart," Victoria had whispered, taking Samantha's small hands in her own. "I know this feels like the end of the world. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to face this together, and we're going to become the kind of people who help others when their worlds fall apart too." That promise had carried them through 12 years of challenges. Victoria working double shifts to pay for Samantha's education while pursuing her own advanced certifications. Samantha excelling academically while learning to channel her grief into purpose, eventually choosing emergency management as her college major because she wanted to help communities prepare for disasters. They had built something remarkable together, a family forged by shared values rather than just shared blood. Victoria had taught Samantha that strength wasn't about avoiding difficulty, but about finding ways to transform difficulty into service for others. That love wasn't just about being present for happy moments, but about being the kind of person others could count on when everything went wrong. Samantha opened her eyes and looked around the auditorium with new clarity. She saw the frustrated parents, the disappointed officials, the awkward ceremony proceedings. But she also saw something else, an opportunity to demonstrate exactly what Victoria had been teaching her all these years. Victoria wasn't here because someone else desperately needed her specialized skills. Samantha didn't know the specific details yet, but she knew her aunt well enough to understand that only a life-or-death emergency would pull her away from this moment. That meant people were in danger somewhere, and Victoria was using her training and experience to save them. "Ladies and gentlemen," Principal Williams announced with barely concealed relief, "we have arranged for Assistant Principal Martinez to offer some brief remarks in place of our scheduled keynote address." Assistant Principal Martinez approached the podium nervously, clearly unprepared for this moment. He shuffled through hastily written notes and began speaking about perseverance in the face of challenges and the importance of education in building character. His words were generic and uninspiring, exactly the kind of placeholder content that everyone could recognize as a last-minute substitution. Samantha felt something shift inside her as she listened to the inadequate replacement for Victoria's carefully planned speech. This wasn't just about her disappointment anymore. This was about 847 graduating students who deserved better than awkward apologies and hastily assembled remarks. This was about honoring the education they'd all worked so hard to complete. More importantly, this was about demonstrating the values Victoria had instilled in her. Values that didn't disappear just because Victoria couldn't be physically present. To represent them herself, as Assistant Principal Martinez stumbled through his improvised remarks, Samantha made a decision that would define not just this moment, but her understanding of what it meant to carry forward someone else's legacy. She stood up. The movement was subtle at first, but in the front row of a graduation ceremony, any unexpected action draws immediate attention. Several students near her turned to look, then parents in the rows behind began noticing the disturbance. Assistant Principal Martinez paused in his speech, clearly uncertain whether to acknowledge what was happening. Samantha walked calmly to the side aisle, her graduation gown flowing behind her as she moved with purposeful dignity toward the stage. The auditorium began buzzing with confused whispers as 847 people tried to understand what the valedictorian was doing. Principal Williams stepped forward with alarm. "Miss Ashford, please return to your seat. This is highly irregular." But Samantha was already climbing the steps to the stage, her movements confident and deliberate. She had something important to say, and she was going to say it whether the ceremony's official program had a place for her words or not. She approached the podium where Assistant Principal Martinez stood frozen with uncertainty. "Excuse me, sir," she said politely but firmly. "I'd like to address my fellow graduates and their families." The auditorium fell into complete silence. Principal Williams looked like he was about to intervene, but County Superintendent Morrison held up a hand to stop him. Something about Samantha's composure and determination suggested this wasn't a breakdown or an emotional outburst. This was a young woman who had something important to communicate. Samantha adjusted the microphone and looked out at the sea of faces staring back at her. She thought about Victoria, who was probably covered in concrete dust and exhaustion somewhere, using her skills to pull people from danger. She thought about the speech they'd planned together, the words about service and sacrifice that were supposed to inspire these graduates to find their own ways of making the world better. Most of all, she thought about the lesson Victoria had been teaching her since she was 6 years old, that real love isn't just about showing up for the easy moments. Real love is about making sure the people you care about have what they need to succeed, even when you can't be there to give it to them personally. Samantha took a deep breath and began to speak, her voice carrying clearly through the auditorium's sound system. She was going to deliver the speech Victoria couldn't give, but she was going to do it in her own words, with her own understanding of what those shared values actually meant. "My fellow graduates," she began, "I want to tell you about what real strength looks like." While Samantha was finding her voice at the graduation podium, 30 miles away at Pinecrest Elementary, Victoria's rescue operation had reached a critical juncture. She was coordinating the extraction of the 4th victim when her radio crackled with an unexpected transmission from Station 19's communications officer. "Captain Ashford, we have Captain Reynolds from Station 7 requesting immediate patch through. Says it's urgent regarding your family situation." Victoria paused in her coordination of the hydraulic equipment and accepted the radio call. Captain Marcus Reynolds had served alongside her for 8 years before transferring to the Eastern District. More importantly, he was one of the few people who truly understood the bond between Victoria and Samantha. "Vic, I just heard about the graduation situation from my wife." Reynolds' voice came through clearly despite the distance. "She's watching the ceremony livestream because our neighbor's kid is graduating. Your niece just took the podium and she's giving the speech you were supposed to deliver." Victoria's hand stopped moving entirely. "What do you mean she's giving the speech?" Samantha stood up in the middle of the ceremony, walked onto the stage, and started addressing the entire auditorium about what real strength looks like. She's talking about you, Vic. She's explaining why you're not there and what that actually means. Victoria felt something crack open in her chest as she absorbed this information. She could picture Samantha with perfect clarity standing at that podium with the same determined posture she'd inherited from 12 years of Victoria's influence, speaking to hundreds of people who had been judging both of them just minutes earlier. "Reynolds, I need you to do something for me," Victoria said urgently. "I need you to get to that graduation ceremony as fast as you can." "Vic, I'm 45 minutes away, even with emergency response protocols. The ceremony will be over by the time I—" "Not just you," Victoria interrupted, her mind racing through possibilities. "I need you to call everyone from our old Heavy Rescue Training Academy class. Everyone who's within driving distance of Riverside Academy. Tell them what's happening and ask them to get there immediately." Reynolds was quiet for a moment, clearly processing the unusual request. "Vic, what exactly are you asking me to do?" Victoria looked around at the debris field where her current rescue operation was progressing steadily. 2 more victims had been successfully extracted in the past hour, and her team had established stable access routes to the remaining trapped workers. The operation was proceeding exactly according to protocol, but it would still require several more hours to complete safely. "I'm asking you to represent me at my niece's graduation," Victoria said simply. "Samantha shouldn't have to handle this situation alone. She deserves to have people there who understand what we do and why we do it. You want us to show up at a graduation ceremony in our dress uniforms." "I want you to show up as my colleagues and my friends," Victoria clarified. "Samantha has heard stories about all of you for years. She knows about the training exercises we've done together, the emergency responses we've coordinated, the way we support each other when the work gets difficult. She deserves to see that support system in person." Reynolds understood immediately. In their line of work, the concept of professional family was as important as blood family. When one member of their community couldn't fulfill a commitment due to emergency response duties, the others stepped in to ensure that commitment was honored in some meaningful way. "Give me 15 minutes to make some calls," Reynolds said. "I'll reach out to everyone from our Heavy Rescue Certification class, plus anyone else from the Tri-County area who knows you personally." "How many people are we talking about potentially?" Victoria calculated quickly. "There should be at least 20 active fire and rescue personnel within reasonable driving distance who've worked with me directly over the past 5 years. Maybe more if word spreads through the usual channels." "And you want all of us to just show up at this graduation ceremony?" "I want you to show up for Samantha," Victoria corrected. "She's been planning this day for months, and she specifically requested me as the keynote speaker because she wanted to honor everything we've built together as a family. Now she's up there speaking for both of us, handling a situation that no 18-year-old should have to handle alone." Victoria paused as her rescue team successfully stabilized another section of debris, clearing the path for the next extraction. "Reynolds, Samantha has spent 12 years learning what it means to be part of a community that serves others. She's watched me leave for emergencies, she's understood why the work matters, and she's chosen her own career path based on those values. But she's never actually seen the community that backs up those values. So you want us to be that visible community." "I want her to understand that she's not just Victoria Ashford's niece," Victoria explained. "She's part of a larger family of people who've dedicated their lives to emergency response. When I can't be there for her, she has an entire network of people who respect what we've built together and want to honor that commitment." Reynolds was already moving toward his vehicle as they spoke. "I'm calling Patterson from Station 15, Williams from the County Emergency Management Office, and Torres from the Wildfire Response Team. If we coordinate properly, we should be able to get a significant group to that ceremony." Make sure everyone understands this isn't about creating a spectacle, Victoria emphasized. This is about showing Samantha that the values she's learned from me are shared by a whole community of people who live those values every day. Understood? We're representing the profession, not just showing up in uniform. Victoria felt a surge of gratitude that threatened to overwhelm her focus on the rescue operation. Reynolds, I can't tell you how much this means to me. Samantha has sacrificed so much over the years because of my work schedule and my emergency response commitments. She deserves to see that those sacrifices contributed to something larger than just my individual career. Vic, every one of us has been where you are right now, Reynolds replied. We've all had to choose between family events and emergency response. The difference is that most of us have partners or extended family who can step in when we're called away. Samantha has been handling this kind of situation by herself for 12 years, which is exactly why she shouldn't have to handle today by herself either. Reynolds was already on his second phone call as he drove toward Riverside Academy. I'm getting good responses, Vic. Patterson is 20 minutes out, and he's bringing Martinez from his crew. Williams is coordinating with 3 other county emergency management staff members. This is happening. Victoria returned her attention to the rescue operation, but with a completely different emotional foundation than she'd had 30 minutes earlier. Samantha wasn't facing this situation alone anymore. In less than an hour, she would see exactly what it meant to be part of a community that understood service, sacrifice, and the importance of keeping commitments to the people who mattered most. The rescue operation continued with renewed focus. But now Victoria was working not just to save the trapped construction workers, but to finish her mission quickly enough to coordinate with the team of colleagues who were racing toward her niece's graduation ceremony. Captain Reynolds disconnected his call with Victoria and immediately began executing what would become the most precisely coordinated non-emergency response operation of his career. His first call went to Lieutenant Sarah Patterson at Station 15. Who had worked alongside Victoria during the devastating Millbrook County wildfire response 3 years earlier. Patterson, I need you to drop everything and get to Riverside Academy. In full dress uniform within the next hour, Reynolds said without preamble. Victoria Ashford's niece is graduating today, and Vic is stuck coordinating a structural collapse rescue at Pinecrest Elementary. Patterson didn't hesitate. How many people are we talking about? And what's the specific plan? As many qualified personnel as we can coordinate on short notice. The girl is currently giving the keynote speech that Victoria was supposed to deliver, handling a situation that no 18-year-old should have to manage alone. We're going to show her that Victoria's professional family stands behind her when Victoria can't be there personally. Patterson was already changing into her dress uniform as she spoke. I can reach Martinez and Chun from my current crew, plus I have contact information for at least 6 other fire and rescue personnel who've worked directly with Victoria on major incidents. Give me the address and the timing details. Reynolds provided the logistics while simultaneously calling Captain David Torres from the County Wildfire Response Team. Torres had served with Victoria during the massive Silver Creek fire evacuation, where her technical rescue expertise had been crucial in extracting trapped hikers from dangerous terrain. Torres, emergency family support situation. Victoria Ashford needs representation at her niece's graduation ceremony at Riverside Academy. Are you available to respond immediately? For Victoria? Absolutely. What's the situation? Reynolds explained the circumstances while Torres gathered his dress uniform and coordinated with his own team members. I can bring Williams and Rodriguez from my unit. Williams specifically owes Victoria for that cliff rescue training she provided last year. We'll be en route within 15 minutes. The third call went to Master Sergeant Jennifer Collins from the County Emergency Management Office. Collins had worked with Victoria on dozens of multi-agency disaster response operations and understood better than most the personal sacrifices required by their profession. Collins, I need you to coordinate dress uniform response for Victoria Ashford's family emergency. Her niece is graduating today, and Victoria is stuck at a rescue operation. The girl needs to see Victoria's professional support network. Collins immediately understood the mission parameters. How formal do we need to be about this? Are we talking about a small show of support or a full ceremonial presence? Full ceremonial presence, Reynolds confirmed. This young woman has spent 12 years watching her aunt leave for emergencies and understanding why the work matters. Today she needs to see that the community of people Victoria serves with recognizes her sacrifice and wants to honor the commitment Victoria couldn't keep. Collins was already reviewing her contact database for available personnel. I can coordinate with the regional emergency management staff. We have at least 8 people who work directly with Victoria on major incident responses. Plus I know Captain Morrison from the State Fire Marshal's office is in town for a conference. He specifically requested Victoria as a training coordinator for next year's Advanced Rescue Certification program. Reynolds felt the operation gaining momentum with each successful contact. Collins, can you handle the coordination logistics? While I focus on driving, I need someone to manage arrival timing, formation protocols, and communication with the school administration. Consider it handled. I'll establish a communication channel for everyone involved and coordinate our approach, so we don't create chaos at the ceremony. What's the current status of the graduation? Victoria's niece took the podium about 20 minutes ago to deliver the speech Victoria was supposed to give. According to my wife, who's watching the live stream, the girl is explaining why Victoria isn't there and what that means about the nature of emergency response work. Collins felt a surge of professional pride mixed with personal concern. So she's representing not just herself and Victoria, but all of us who do this work. That's a lot of pressure for an 18-year-old. Which is exactly why she needs to see that she's not carrying that representation alone, Reynolds confirmed. She needs to understand that Victoria's values and commitments are shared by an entire community of people who live those values every day. He turned to address the full auditorium. Ladies and gentlemen, we're not just attending a graduation ceremony today. We're witnessing a real-time example of the values that guide people who dedicate their lives to protecting others. Miss Ashford's aunt isn't absent because she doesn't care about this ceremony. She's absent because someone else's family desperately needs her expertise right now. Channel 8 news reporter Jessica Walsh quickly repositioned her camera crew to capture what had transformed from a disappointing ceremony into something much more significant. This wasn't just a graduation with a missing keynote speaker anymore. This was a story about community, professional dedication, and the way shared values create support networks that transcend individual presence. Samantha looked out at the uniformed emergency response personnel and felt a profound shift in her understanding of what family actually meant. She wasn't Victoria's niece who had been abandoned at her graduation ceremony. She was a member of a community that understood service, sacrifice, and the importance of standing together when individual members couldn't be physically present. "Thank you," she said to Reynolds and his colleagues, her voice carrying clearly through the auditorium sound system. "Thank you for showing me that the values my aunt taught me are shared by all of you. Thank you for demonstrating that real family isn't just about blood relationships. It's about shared commitment to protecting and supporting others." The auditorium erupted in sustained applause as 847 graduates and their families finally understood what they were actually witnessing. Samantha stepped closer to the podium's microphone and looked directly at Captain Reynolds and the 19 emergency response personnel positioned throughout the auditorium. The applause had died down, and she could feel the weight of nearly 1,000 people waiting for her next words. This was no longer just a graduation speech. This had become something much more significant. "Captain Reynolds," she began, her voice steady and clear, Would you and your colleagues join me on this stage? I think it's time everyone here understood exactly what my Aunt Victoria has been teaching me for the past 12 years. Reynolds exchanged glances with Lieutenant Patterson and Master Sergeant Collins. This wasn't part of any plan they had discussed, but Samantha's request carried the kind of quiet authority that reminded all of them of Victoria herself. They began moving toward the stage in coordinated formation, their dress uniforms creating a striking visual against the Academy's formal ceremony. Backdrop. As the emergency response personnel arranged themselves on the stage behind Samantha, she turned to face the full auditorium with unprecedented confidence. The nervous 18-year-old who had been waiting for her aunt to appear had transformed into someone who understood exactly what she needed to communicate. My fellow graduates and families, Samantha continued, I want to tell you about the real keynote speech my Aunt Victoria was planning to deliver today. We spent 3 months working on it together, and the central message was this: the strongest people aren't those who avoid difficult situations, but those who transform their challenges into tools for helping others. She gestured toward Captain Reynolds. Captain Reynolds just told you that my aunt is currently extracting trapped construction workers from a collapsed building. What he didn't tell you is that my aunt developed her expertise in structural collapse rescue because of the fire that killed my parents when I was 6 years old. The auditorium fell into profound silence as Samantha continued. My parents died because the first responders who arrived at our house fire didn't have the advanced training necessary to extract victims from complex structural collapse situations. My Aunt Victoria was a paramedic then, and she watched my parents die because the rescue techniques and equipment available weren't sufficient for that type of emergency. Lieutenant Patterson felt tears forming in her eyes as she understood the deeper context of Victoria's career trajectory. This wasn't just professional dedication. This was personal mission driven by profound loss. After my parents' funeral, Samantha continued, my aunt made 2 promises. First, that she would raise me with the values my parents would have wanted me to learn. Second, that she would develop the expertise necessary to ensure that other families wouldn't lose people the way we lost my parents. Captain Torres stepped slightly forward on the stage, understanding that Samantha was sharing something that went far beyond typical graduation ceremony content. This was a young woman explaining the foundational experiences that had shaped both her and her aunt's understanding of service and sacrifice. Victoria spent the next 4 years completing advanced fire science education, structural engineering, coursework, and specialized rescue certifications, Samantha explained to the captivated audience. She became one of the most qualified technical rescue specialists in the region because she was determined that no family would experience what we experienced due to lack of proper training or equipment. Master Sergeant Collins nodded with professional recognition. She had worked alongside Victoria on numerous complex rescue operations and had always been impressed by her combination of technical expertise and emotional investment in successful outcomes. Now she understood the personal history that drove that exceptional dedication. My aunt has missed birthday parties, school plays, Christmas morning celebrations, and now my graduation ceremony, Samantha continued. But every single time, it was because someone else's family needed her to prevent them from experiencing the loss that shaped our lives. She turned to face Captain Reynolds directly. Captain Reynolds, could you please tell everyone how many families my aunt has helped reunite during emergency situations over the past 12 years? Reynolds calculated quickly, drawing on his knowledge of Victoria's involvement in major rescue operations. Miss Ashford, I can document at least 47 successful extractions of trapped individuals that your aunt has coordinated or directly performed. That represents 47 families who went home together instead of experiencing devastating loss. Lieutenant Hayes added supporting details. During the Silver Creek fire evacuation alone, Captain Ashford personally extracted 11 hikers from dangerous cliff positions. 3 of those individuals were children under the age of 10. Captain Torres contributed additional context. Your aunt's technical rescue training protocols have been adopted by fire departments across 3 counties. The techniques she developed are currently being used to train the next generation of emergency response professionals. Samantha smiled with profound pride as she absorbed this information. So when people ask me why my aunt isn't here today, the answer is simple. She's doing exactly what she's been doing for 12 years, using the skills she developed because of our tragedy to prevent other families from experiencing similar tragedies. She addressed the full auditorium with growing strength. My aunt taught me that love isn't just about being physically present for happy occasions. Love is about becoming the kind of person who can be counted on when everything goes wrong. Love is about developing skills and expertise that can save lives when others are in desperate situations. County Superintendent Morrison stood up and began applauding, followed immediately by the entire auditorium. This wasn't polite graduation ceremony applause. This was recognition of something profound and meaningful that transcended typical educational milestone celebrations. But here's what I learned today that my aunt couldn't have taught me through words alone, Samantha continued as the applause subsided. I learned that when you live your life with genuine dedication to serving others, you create a community of people who will represent your values when you can't be there to represent them yourself. She gestured toward the 19 emergency response personnel standing behind her on the stage. These men and women didn't have to come here today. They chose to be here because my aunt has earned their respect through years of shared service and mutual support. They're here because they understand that families matter, that commitments matter, and that communities take care of each other. Principal Williams approached the podium microphone, clearly moved by what he had witnessed. Miss Ashford, on behalf of Riverside Academy and this entire community, I want to thank you for providing us with something far more valuable than any keynote speech we could have arranged. You've shown us what authentic leadership looks like, and you've demonstrated the values that we hope all our graduates will carry forward into their adult lives. The ceremony had transformed completely. What began as an awkward situation with a missing speaker had become a powerful demonstration of family, community, and the way shared values create support networks that transcend individual presence or absence. As Samantha concluded her remarks and the auditorium erupted in thunderous applause, Principal Williams made an unprecedented decision. He approached the podium and announced that the ceremony would include a live video connection to Captain Victoria Ashford at the Pinecrest Elementary Rescue Site. Ladies and gentlemen, Principal Williams declared, with the assistance of our emergency response guests, we've established communication with Captain Ashford. She's requested permission to address this assembly directly from her current location. The auditorium's main screen, typically used for displaying graduation slideshows, flickered to life, showing Victoria's face. She was clearly exhausted, her uniform covered in concrete dust and debris, her hair disheveled from hours of intensive rescue work. Behind her, emergency vehicles and rescue equipment were visible, along with other personnel coordinating the ongoing operation. Samantha, Victoria's voice came through the sound system, slightly distorted by the emergency communication equipment, but unmistakably filled with emotion. I'm watching you right now, sweetheart, and I have never been more proud of anyone in my entire life. Samantha felt tears streaming down her face as she saw her aunt for the first time since leaving for the rescue operation early that morning. Victoria looked exhausted but determined, exactly the way she always looked when coordinating complex emergency responses. I need everyone in that auditorium to understand something, Victoria continued, addressing the full assembly. What you just witnessed from my niece standing up, taking responsibility, explaining difficult circumstances with grace and strength, that's not something I taught her. That's who she's always been. That's the person who made me want to be worthy of raising her. Captain Reynolds stepped closer to the screen and provided Victoria with operational updates. Captain Ashford, we have 19 personnel here representing stations and agencies across the Tri-County area. We're honored to stand with Samantha today on your behalf. Victoria's composure almost broke as she absorbed the visual of her colleagues arranged on the graduation stage behind Samantha. Reynolds, I don't have words to express what this means to me. Seeing all of you there, representing not just me, but the values we share, this is exactly what I wanted Samantha to understand about our professional community. Lieutenant Patterson approached the screen. Victoria, how's the rescue operation progressing? Can you give us details about the current situation? Victoria's expression shifted to professional focus. We successfully extracted the 6th victim 20 minutes ago. He's en route to County General with serious but stable injuries. We have one remaining victim trapped in the most challenging section of the debris field. The structural engineer estimates we need approximately 90 more minutes to complete the extraction safely. Master Sergeant Collins provided additional context for the auditorium audience. What Captain Ashford isn't telling you is that she's been coordinating this operation for over 8 hours without a break. The technical complexity of this rescue requires constant oversight from someone with her specific certifications. Victoria shook her head dismissively. Collins, every person on this rescue team has been working just as hard. This is what we do. We stay until everyone goes home safely. Samantha stepped closer to the screen, her voice carrying clearly through the communication system. Aunt Vic, I want you to know that I understand now what you've been trying to teach me all these years. It's not just about being strong when things get difficult. It's about building the kind of life where your strength serves something larger than yourself. Victoria's voice caught with emotion. Samantha, you've just delivered the keynote speech I was planning to give, but you did it better than I ever could have. You explained what our work means, what our values represent, and why communities like this matter. You've honored your parents' memory and shown everyone what real leadership looks like. County Superintendent Morrison approached the screen to address Victoria directly. Captain Ashford, I want to extend an official invitation for you to speak at our district's annual Emergency Preparedness Conference this fall. What we've witnessed today demonstrates exactly the kind of professional dedication and community values we want to highlight for our educational community. Victoria nodded gratefully. Superintendent Morrison, I'd be honored to participate, but I'd like to request that Samantha co-present with me. She's demonstrated today that she understands these concepts better than most adults in emergency management. The auditorium erupted in supportive applause as Samantha's face lit up with surprise and pride. This wasn't just recognition of her handling of a difficult situation. This was acknowledgement that she had legitimately contributed something valuable to the community's understanding of emergency response work. Captain Torres provided updates on the rescue operation's broader impact. Victoria, I want you to know that Channel 8 News is here covering both the graduation ceremony and the rescue operation. They're planning a feature story about how emergency response professionals balance family commitments with life-saving work. Victoria looked directly into the camera, addressing the auditorium. If this story helps people understand what our work requires and why it matters, then something positive will have come from a very difficult day. But I want everyone to understand that the real story here isn't about me missing a graduation ceremony. The real story is about a young woman who faced an unexpected challenge with grace, strength, and wisdom. She addressed Samantha directly. Sweetheart, you've just shown 847 graduating students and their families what authentic leadership looks like. You've demonstrated that real strength isn't about avoiding difficult situations. It's about finding ways to transform difficult situations into opportunities to serve others. Samantha wiped tears from her eyes as she responded. Aunt Vic, I learned that from watching you for 12 years. But today I learned something else. I Learned that the values you taught me are shared by an entire community of people who dedicate their lives to protecting others. Victoria's radio crackled in the background with updates from the rescue site. I need to return to the operation, she said reluctantly. But Samantha, I want you to know that watching you handle today's situation has been the greatest graduation gift you could have given me. You've proven that everything we've built together, our family, our values, our understanding of service, all of it is going to continue through you. The connection remained active as Victoria returned to coordinating the final extraction, allowing the auditorium to witness in real time the demanding work that had required her absence. The audience could see the complexity of the rescue operation, the careful coordination required, and the life or death decisions that Victoria was making moment by moment. As the ceremony concluded with the traditional diploma presentations, 19 emergency response personnel remained on stage, standing as living representatives of the professional community that had shaped both Victoria and Samantha's understanding of dedication, service, and family. 3 hours after the graduation ceremony concluded, Victoria's radio crackled with the final update from the Pinecrest Elementary Rescue Site. All victims successfully extracted. The last construction worker is en route to County General Hospital with stable vital signs. Operation complete. Victoria slumped against her command vehicle, the adrenaline that had sustained her through 11 hours of intensive rescue coordination finally beginning to ebb. 7 human beings were alive and safe because of the work her team had performed. Today, 7 families would be reunited instead of receiving devastating phone calls about workplace accidents and collapsed buildings. Her personal phone buzzed with a text from Samantha. Aunt Vic, I'm so proud of you. Come home when you can. I have something important to show you. Victoria smiled through her exhaustion and began the 45-minute drive back to Millbrook County. The graduation ceremony had ended 6 hours earlier, but she could still hardly believe what Captain Reynolds had coordinated on her behalf. 19 emergency response professionals had taken time from their own schedules to represent her at Samantha's graduation, transforming what could have been a devastating disappointment into something profound and meaningful. When Victoria finally arrived home at 6:30 p.m., she found Samantha waiting in the living room wearing her graduation gown and holding a large gift box wrapped in silver paper. The house was decorated with congratulations banners and balloons, clearly prepared before Victoria had left for the emergency call that morning. "Sweetheart, you didn't need to wait up for me," Victoria said, settling into her favorite chair with visible relief. "I know today didn't go the way we planned it." Samantha smiled with the kind of mature wisdom that reminded Victoria why she'd been so determined to raise this remarkable young woman properly. "Aunt Vic, today went exactly the way it needed to go. I learned something about our family and our values that I never could have learned if you'd been sitting in that auditorium giving your prepared speech." She handed Victoria the gift box. "I want you to open this. But first I need to tell you what happened after you left this morning." Victoria carefully unwrapped the silver paper to reveal a beautifully crafted shadow box containing photographs from throughout their 12 years together. Pictures of Victoria teaching Samantha to ride a bicycle, both of them covered in paint. While renovating Samantha's bedroom, Victoria in her dress uniform receiving a commendation while Samantha watched proudly from the audience. Samantha, at various ages, wearing oversized firefighter helmets from Victoria's collection. But the centerpiece of the shadow box was a photograph that Victoria had never seen before, an image from today's graduation ceremony showing Samantha standing at the podium with 19 emergency response personnel arranged behind her on the stage. All of them in dress uniform, all of them representing the professional community that had shaped both their lives. "Captain Reynolds had the ceremony photographed," Samantha explained. "He said you needed to see what it looked like when your professional family stepped up to support your personal family." Victoria stared at the photograph with tears forming in her eyes. She could see the dignity and strength in Samantha's posture, the respect and solidarity demonstrated by her colleagues, and the way the entire composition captured something essential about service, community, and shared values. "There's something else," Samantha continued, pulling out a folded piece of paper. "Principal Williams asked me to deliver this to you personally." Victoria unfolded the paper to find an official letter from Riverside Academy's administration. "Captain Victoria Ashford, today's graduation ceremony provided our entire community with something far more valuable than any keynote address we could have arranged. Your niece's demonstration of leadership, your colleagues' representation of professional dedication, and your own real-time example of life-saving service created an educational experience that our students and families will remember for years to come. We would be honored to have you serve as our featured speaker for next year's graduation ceremony, with the understanding that if emergency response duties require your absence, the precedent has been established for your professional community to represent your values and commitments. Additionally, we would like to establish an annual scholarship in your family's name, recognizing students who demonstrate exceptional dedication to community, service, and emergency preparedness. Respectfully yours, Principal Williams." And the Riverside Academy Board of Directors. Victoria read the letter twice, hardly able to process that what had seemed like her greatest failure as a guardian had somehow transformed into recognition and opportunity. "Aunt Vic," Samantha said gently, "I need you to understand something important. I wasn't disappointed that you missed my graduation ceremony. I was proud that the person who raised me was out there saving lives when people desperately needed her expertise." She settled into the chair across from Victoria, her graduation gown spreading around her like a formal robe. "But what made today truly special wasn't your absence or your presence. It was seeing that the values you taught me, service, dedication, putting others' desperate needs ahead of our own comfort, those values are shared by an entire community of people who've dedicated their lives to protecting others." Victoria set down the letter and looked directly at her niece. "Samantha, I made you a promise 12 years ago that I would be there for every important moment in your life. Today I broke that promise." "No, you didn't," Samantha replied with absolute certainty. "You promised to be there for me, and you were. You were there through Captain Reynolds and Lieutenant Patterson and Master Sergeant Collins, and 18 other people who came to represent everything you've taught me about strength, service, and community." She gestured toward the shadow box. "Photograph. Look at that picture, Aunt Vic. That's not a graduation ceremony with a missing keynote speaker. That's a demonstration of what happens when you live your life with genuine dedication to helping others. You create a network of people who will step forward to honor your commitments when emergency situations prevent you from honoring them yourself." Victoria felt a profound shift in her understanding of what had occurred during the day. "You're saying that the community we built through shared work and shared values became visible today in a way it never had been before." "I'm saying that today I learned I'm not just Victoria Ashford's niece," Samantha replied. "I'm a member of a community that understands service, sacrifice, and the importance of taking care of each other when individual members can't be physically present." Victoria stood up and embraced Samantha with 12 years' worth of love, pride, and gratitude. "Sweetheart, what you did today standing up in that auditorium and explaining what our work means and why it matters, that took more courage and wisdom than anything I've ever done in emergency response." Samantha smiled against Victoria's shoulder. "I learned it from watching you, Aunt Vic, but today I learned that the lessons you taught me aren't just personal. They're part of something much larger that connects all of us who understand that. Real love sometimes means choosing service over presence." As they held each other in their living room, surrounded by graduation decorations and the evidence of 12 years of shared challenges and growth, both women understood that this day had become something neither of them could have planned or anticipated. It had become a demonstration of how authentic commitment creates communities that transcend individual limitations, and how love expresses itself not just through presence, but through the values and connections that ensure no one ever faces life's important moments truly alone. The graduation ceremony that almost didn't happen had become the graduation ceremony that changed everything for Samantha, for Victoria, and for an entire community that witnessed what real family actually looks like when it's built on service, sacrifice, and shared dedication to protecting others. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.